Did It Happen? A Christmas storybook written by Stuart Scammell and illustrated by Faye Medland. Malachi lived 2,000 years ago in a small town called Bethlehem. His parents owned an inn, and he often had to work hard as there were so many jobs to do. At certain times of the year, it was very busy, and Malachi seemed to spend all day helping to get the inn ready for visitors. Malachi didn't mind helping out, but he often became bored with making beds and helping his mother cook. Malachi preferred helping with the animals, feeding them or changing their straw. When the village was quieter, and Malachi wasn't so busy, he loved watching the shepherds leading the sheep across the hillsides. He was a little jealous of the boys whose fathers were shepherds. He thought it would be great to stay out on the hillsides all night and sit around the fire while the sheep slept in the sheepfold. Sometimes when the weather was colder or the rain swept in, Malachi was glad that he was an innkeeper's son, and he could shelter behind the thick stone walls of the inn. He loved sitting by the warm log fire, with the comforting smell of food being cooked for the travellers. Even when it was very busy, Malachi's parents made sure that he went to the synagogue with the other children to learn about the old Jewish scrolls. And Malachi loved hearing the stories of the history of his people, and how God saved them from their enemies, and how God had blessed them so much. He loved hearing about how God had shown his care in the past. But most of all, Malachi liked to hear the prophecy scrolls read. Prophecies were messages from God, sometimes warning the people. But Malachi got excited about the things that God said would happen in the future. One day as he was listening in the synagogue, a scroll was being read. It was the scroll of the prophet with the same name as his, Malachi. He also learnt that day that Malachi means messenger, and on his way home Malachi felt very special and decided he wanted to hear more about the messages that God had given his people. At home he asked his mother and his father about the old prophets, and although they were very busy, they spent time explaining the messages of the prophets that had come true over the centuries. Malachi sat and listened to them, absolutely spellbound. However, he did have one burning question. Have all the prophecies of God come true, he asked. He was told that many had come true, and not one had ever been proved to be wrong. However, some prophecies were still to happen. He listened entranced, as his father read from another prophecy, written by a man called Isaiah. It told of a son that would be born, who would be extraordinary. In fact, he would be God's son. Malachi's mother loved seeing just how interested he was. She smiled and told him about a very special prophecy God had given to a prophet called Micah, about 700 years earlier. Malachi couldn't wait to hear. Why was it so special? His mother told him that their village, Bethlehem, was named as the place where God's son would be born. Did it happen? Malachi asked eagerly. Not yet, said his mother. But it will. God's prophecies always do. Malachi wondered when this would be, and over the next few weeks and months he wondered just how all this would happen. Some time later, Malachi was very busy doing jobs for his parents in the inn. The inn was filling up quickly. He didn't understand everything that had happened, but he heard that a Roman emperor had ordered everyone to go back to their hometown to be counted. People who left the village years ago were now returning to be counted. They all needed a place to stay. Very soon the last room was taken. Bethlehem was full, and the streets were bustling. Although the inn was full, people kept knocking the door and asking for a room. Malachi's father told him to answer the door and tell people that they were full. Malachi was constantly answering the door and turning people away as his parents hurried around the inn cooking and serving. At sunset, Malachi sat at the grey stone step outside the inn door. What a busy day. Most people had found somewhere to stay. As Malachi looked down the street, silhouetted against the orange glow of the sunset, there was a donkey being led by a man with a lady on its back. Malachi watched as they came closer, and wondered why they were so late. As they got even closer, Malachi saw the lady was expecting a baby. No wonder they're late. That must have been a very difficult journey. They asked if there were any rooms left, and when Malachi shook his head, the lady looked sad, and a tear rolled down her cheek. They both looked so tired, and Malachi felt really disappointed that he couldn't help. As they plodded off down the road, Malachi suddenly had a thought. Their inn was on a hillside, and underneath the inn there was an area that they used to keep animals. Earlier that morning, Malachi had changed all the straw, and it was always quite cosy there at night, as the animals kept it warm. He considered for a moment, and then thought, if the lady gives birth, she would be better there than somewhere under the stars. Malachi abandoned his post by the door, and ran after the couple, and persuaded them to come and stay with the animals. The couple were called Joseph and Mary, and they gratefully settled down in the straw. Malachi busied himself, getting more fresh, clean straw for them, and feeding their donkey. Malachi's parents wondered where he'd gone, and when his mother found him, she was surprised to see a young couple in their stable, and was concerned to see that the lady was heavily pregnant. After her initial shock, she told Malachi that she was proud of how he had helped them, and told him to go and get some food for them. Mary and Joseph heartily ate their food, but soon it was obvious that she was about to give birth. Malachi was sent to bed, but he didn't sleep. That night he lay awake. He thought he could hear the most beautiful singing, and suddenly the sky was bright. He jumped up and looked out of the window to see the sky filled with angels praising God. He watched and wondered if this could be God's prophecy coming true. It must be. Malachi felt excited, but he knew it would be another busy day tomorrow, so he tried to sleep. Just as he was dropping off, there was a commotion outside. Malachi opened the shutters to see a group of shepherds looking up and down the street. Malachi's father went out to see what they were searching for. They told him that they had had a message from the angel of the Lord. It was good news, bringing great joy. This news was for everyone, and it was that a Saviour had been born. The angel had told them that they would know they had found him when they saw the sign. The sign that would be that when they found the baby was that it would be wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger. Malachi, overhearing this, jumped out of bed. A manger was a cattle trough that animals ate from. Malachi had had the bright idea of emptying it last night. He had done this so that it could be used as a cot if the baby was born. He filled it with soft, clean straw. Malachi ran downstairs and beckoned to the shepherds to follow him as he led them to where the animals were. When the shepherds saw Mary and Joseph with the baby in the manger, they fell quiet. They knelt down and worshipped the Saviour, God's Son, who had been born on that very first Christmas to be the Saviour of the world. Eventually, Malachi returned to his room and wondered exactly how this baby, God's Son, would become the Saviour. Whilst wondering about this, he drifted off to sleep.